Welcome to the So What from BCG, the podcast that explores the big ideas shaping business, the economy and society. I'm Georgie Frost. In this episode, what does it really take to build a high-performing leadership team? Not just a group of talented individuals, but one that truly works together. Research shows the best teams don't just perform better internally, they deliver 23% higher profitability than those in the bottom quartile. And the role of the CEO in getting the dynamic right is crucial. So how do you achieve it, especially when the CEO's job has never been tougher? Well, joining me to discuss this is Khadija Ben Hammada, Chief People Officer and formerly Chief of Staff at Merck Group, and Judith Wallenstein, Global Leader of BCG's CEO Advisory Practice.
If you look in a way at the textbook management description, it basically says a real team is a team where everyone knows precisely what they have to deliver for the company's success. A high-performing team, in my mind, is a team where everyone knows that and they have a keen sense of accountability, but they also feel very much invested in their peers' success to make sure we're successful as a collective. And that's not only a technical knowledge, it's like a deep emotional bond saying we're only successful if I haven't only delivered for myself, but also for my colleague. And it's what all teams always struggle balancing this out in the right way.
Khadija, you've been in many teams. What makes team work for you, and how do you know you're in one?
You absolutely know when you are in a high-performing team. And first of all, I would like to share that sometimes we make the assumption that when you gather smart people together around the table, the magic happens. But that's not the case. A true high-performing team really emerges when you intentionally design an ecosystem around those people and how they think, how they decide, how they behave together collectively. And then you know you have a high-performing team because they amplify the impact towards the organization.
What does it feel like?
First of all, you need to have a clear ambition. Clarity is absolutely key, but that ambition has to be connected to a meaningful purpose. When you bring ambition and purpose meaningful, that's how emotional commitment is truly transformation. And I have seen that on the field. There is a fundamental notion of psychological safety. And when you have that, you can make sure that risks surface early and us challenge each other without any fear. And obviously, one of the key fundamentals I have seen on the field is about trust. When you build that fundamental muscle of trust to really challenge the status quo, high-performer team, they don't avoid tension. Disagreement is quite good because they help high-performing team to make better decisions. So when you create that safety environment where people can disagree with trust, push the organization to the next level without any fear of consequence, that's how you know you are part of a high-performing team.
And Khadija, it's so interesting, right? If you have a high-performing team, people love coming and presenting to this team and discussing with this team because they feel it gives them energy, recognition. They walk out of the room and they feel it's great.
Exactly. When an executive team operates at its best, the full organization can feel it. They can fake it because the organization feel it. And then it creates clarity, speed, trust, and a sense of possibility. You want that the organization jump on that sense of possibility, and that's how we become unstoppable.
Judith, how much of that success, of a high-performing team success, comes down to what the CEO does, their behaviours, their decision-making, leading from the front, as it were?
I think there's no escape for the CEO in that situation, Georgie, building one's team. And with all the new CEOs we work with, and that is completely irrespective if they're first-time CEOs or if they're serial CEOs, everyone has this really strong focus on building their team. But then you talk to them a decade later when they retire and they look back, and they always say their biggest regret is not making critical people changes earlier. So you see, only the CEO can make these changes when it comes to their executive teams. So yes, I think it's first and foremost the CEO's responsibility. I think it's also such a critical role because if you take the vantage point of the CEO, the chances to roll up your sleeves and operationally impact the business is virtually zero. So your only way to have impact is create the context for others to be successful. And I'd like to come back to something you said before, Khadija. This is so much more than the sum of its parts. The hallmark of a great leader is hiring people who are better than yourself. That doesn't mean that you hire people you think are individually more brilliant than yourself. You hire people or you pick people from your organization who complement your own weaknesses. And for that, you need to be brutally honest with yourself. And then the other thing is you will look at this as a very intricate puzzle, also always considering how these people will work together as a group. So I think the role of the CEO is absolutely critical in this.
Focusing on that element of not having just a group of very talented people, because of course you want talented people, but that's not the only criteria. It's a lot easier when you're bringing people through a company to identify their behaviors and whether they're the right fit. But when you're bringing people from outside, you don't have a lot more to go on, really, than what they've got on their CV and whether they look the part, as it were. So what are you looking for? How do you get that secret sauce, as it were?
I love that question, Georgie. And as a chief people officer, my role is quite often to coach my colleagues from the business, some leaders on you have to build a team for tomorrow. And the best way to do that is to look at what they can do tomorrow, not what they have done yesterday. And to your point, we have a tendency to always look at what they have done yesterday, what they are bringing on their resume. But the key, I will say, secret here is to look at the potential that those people have and what they can really bring going forward. And the role of a CEO, to Judy's point, is to really hire people who are smarter than any of us in the boardroom, to really build that team for tomorrow. A high-performing team need diversity of thought, diversity of background, ruthless prioritization, no compromise on people that we bring. And the courage, it takes courage to upgrade the bench when it really demands it. It also takes courage also to take people who are smarter than you, who can really look at the business under a different angle, who can challenge some of the decisions that you have made. And if you are a CEO, a chief people officer, or a business leader, very secure about that and knowing that you have to build the collective intelligence, not the individual intelligence, that's one step towards, I would say, bringing a high-performing team coming together.
And I think, Khadija, on that point of the external hire, Georgie, you rightfully said it, an external hire is always riskier. We know that, right? That's also why 80% of CEOs' succession in the S&P, for example, are internal successions because they are considered the safer ones. What I've seen a lot, though, is if you look at executive team hirings, when there's a hire from the outside, there are companies where the chief people officer gets quite involved. Yes, it's, of course, usually the purview of the CEO and the board, but when it often comes down to it and you ask them what they really fundamentally respect and value about their chief people officer, they say deep read of the organization, unbiased view on people. They will never be part of a political campaign, and they have deeper human insight than either CEO will ever have. And yes, many executives in an external process can pull off shining in a 1-2 hour interview. I find it quite striking how many cannot. Chief people officers in general are very used to see the cracks in the facade. And so obviously that's usually in a very late stage of interviewing, right? But if you reach those stages of interviewing where a CEO will say, speak to some of your prospective peers to get a view, in that stage, the chief people officer is often absolutely crucial.
Khadija, what does a great CEO and chief people officer relationship look like? How should it work in a really high-functioning team?
The CPO should not be seen as the person that talks about people, but the person that really helped the organization to accelerate strategy and execution. And it starts by really having that trusted relationship with the CEO, but also being capable to challenge, to speak up with the truth, to hold the mirror and stand up for the values, for integrity, but also bringing to the CEO the data he or she can act on. You have access to so much information, and you should be the one to give that pulse to the CEO. Together, they can raise the standards around people, around organization, around leadership. Both of them, in my view, also are setting the tone for the, I will say, culture, momentum they want to basically bring to the organization. They have to be absolutely consistent with their behavior. I quite often like to say the audio has to match the video.
Khadija, as a chief of staff, you observed so many executive meetings. What did you learn then that you've put into practice Now you're on an exec leadership team.
First of all, the chief of staff role, I think, was an amazing opportunity to learn and to prep me to become part of that executive team. First of all, the chief of staff role puts you in the right engine room of the company. You see the whole enterprise at once, the dynamic, the tension, the decision, the trade-off, the pressure points. You learn really how the system really works. What I also have, I will say, learned very much thanks to that role as a chief of staff. It's really an essential, I will say, steps toward leadership, because you have to lead without what we call borrowed authority. Because as you are the chief of staff of a CEO, you also want to drive change through your own identity. You don't want to be the shadow of the CEO. You want to have credibility, you want to have your ability to influence without positional power. So you really learn to drive change with your own leadership voice, not by being the CEO a shadow. The last, I will say, key learning and good preparation to take a C position in the board was speed and humility, and especially humility. You sit next to the CEO during the moment of pressure, during the moment of doubt, complexity, crisis, and you see also what can go right and what could be fragile, and how the tone and behaviors from the town cascade to thousands of people. And that's an humbling opportunity to have. And for me, in my case, as a chief people officer, it really helped me to understand how the human system can accelerate the strategy and its execution, but on the other side also to block it. And I strongly believe that this is one of the best training for any C-suite position, being CPO or CEO. I think it's one of the best role I had in my career.
We've spoken about CPOs, but what about other individual executive team members? What is their responsibility? How do they elevate themselves to elevate the collective performance of the team?
It's up to each individual who wants to be part of the team to behave towards that aspiration. It's not because the boss or the CEO say, hey, we're going to be a high-performing team, that everyone will become high-performing. The day you decide to be part of a team, you have also to make a step forward to build that team. It's a collective effort. It's not an individual top-down exercise. How do you do that? It's by strengthening the condition in which the team can perform. I give you a couple examples I have seen, and I try always to advise. Share information as early as possible. Bring courage to the conversation. Asking something that might not be comfortable is helping to strengthen that high-performing organization. Make decisions very clear. And more important, back to my introduction point, it's about psychological safety. As a part of a key element of the team, make sure that you are a person that listens, that admits when we need help, that raises the hand, that helps to enable the success towards the team, that surface challenges without blaming anyone.
I just wanted to focus a little bit on the uncertainty. Given the fast pace of AI, and not just AI, there's so many things, it seems, going on in the world right now that have, certainly to my mind, shifted the role of what a CEO is required to do. So what does leadership, therefore, look like nowadays? Or is it the same as it ever was, and actually it just feels different now?
I don't think it's the same it ever was. And I would still say that is something that in different shapes and forms CEOs have dealt with. But I think there's some of challenges that hit your company that are entirely out of your control. And you look at something like COVID that, impacted global supply chains and workforces massively. You look at the whole geopolitical tariff, trade, insecurity. You look at tech and AI. But you also look at that deep polarization that we see in all our workforces. And if you look at all of that, and on the other hand, you look at the trust data that has been out, in today's world, trust in public institutions, and that includes also not only your national politicians, but your local politicians, institutions like churches and religious institutions, has eroded enormously. And the person and the institution, most people across a wide array of countries trust most, is not business in the abstract sense. It's my employer and the person who leads the company I work for. If you take that together, Georgie, the speed and amount of challenges that are hitting the company and these outsized expectations of your workforce, that you're that institution of trust and identity and unity for them, I think that makes it an especially challenging job today. And more than ever, it happens on the public stage. every piece of conversation gets overheard, posted on social media. So I think just that level of scrutiny can be quite overwhelming to new CEOs.
I just want to build on what Judith mentioned because I think you described it very well, Judith, what I will call the market dynamic or market tension. Can we really influence all of that? And the answer is no. However, what we can do is our ability to respond to those geopolitical, I would say, dynamic, to uncertainty. Every leader, and especially even today, they are giving orientation. When people don't know how to navigate that uncertainty, they are looking up at each of us every single day for trust, for guidance, for empathy. And that is what the role of a leader is. And the role of a leader is to not have one solution fits all for every team member, but to really to listen carefully to the organization and understand where our people are and where we meet them. With excellence, with high standard, with a lot of level of empathy. And you need that even more today because of what you just described. And the last thing I want to say is a leader more than ever needs to ground their team in today's context. But they also need to do at the same time to bring them hope and confidence about the future. And that is an absolutely unique trait of leader that we need to hold through every single day with our decision behaviors and how we act.
Khadija, I do want to ask you about, I suppose, legacy. The way that you've both described a top performing team is more like a jigsaw. Unfortunately, jigsaw pieces are quite hard to find and put together. How do you make sure that your team is still high performing even when those wonderful elements go?
And that's actually what is my day-to-day job, to make sure that we have the right system, that if someone is moving, the entire high-performing, I will say, organization doesn't collapse. How do you do that? It's going back to what we say as being the ingredient of a high-performing team, having a clear ambition connected to the purpose, this psychological safety. And if you move one player, that psychological safety should remain there. The clarity of decision, making sure that people understand the standards that this team has. So again, when you move a player, the clarity, the accountability, the decision, I will say, governance are definitely here. Make those norms part of the team explicit, non-negotiable. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. So whoever is leaving or whoever is joining, understand that this is how we perform. And if you are, I will say, a good chief people officer, every player talk to you. So you are in the front place to understand the trust level of that team. And your responsibility is to act to make sure that that trust remain very consistent, and also to address it when it's not the case. You should be the one to bring courage to the next level. And also protect the standard of talent and people decision. And our role as an executive team is to make sure that the organization function, operate at any level like a Swiss clock.
Georgie, you take one person out of a team that's really performing at its best. What happens? So obviously you need to have a leader of the team who understand that this requires constant work. I think the other way you really see a difference at the moment where someone moves out of that team is the leader of that team, and that can be the CEO or business unit head, really deeply reflecting on what is the role that outgoing team member played. And there's often a lot more than meets the eye. Is it a person who actually was the challenger in the room when everyone went to groupthink? That's where the CPO, I feel, can often play a really important role, being that thought partner of the respective leader to say, you may think that Georgie, who was just promoted to a different role in your team, did only A. She actually also did B and C, and you may never have seen it. So now the person we're bringing in, how do we either make sure they can pick up the mantle in a way, or we redistribute these tasks on other team members? But for that, you need to have a really hearty dialogue within that team, really get that input from the team, and then say, how do we, in a way, rejiggle with a new person coming in to make sure that we maintain these standards that Khadija spoke about?
We've covered the so what. Now let's focus on the now what, the next practical, immediate steps that leaders can take to create a top performing team.
The now what for me really starts with the leader of that team pinpointing to what they really believe needs to change first, really understanding and reflecting deeply, and often their CPO can help them a lot with that. to understand why are people not behaving as one team? Why are they not doing what we agreed on doing? And what can they, as the CEO or as the leader of the team, really contribute to changing them? I think leaders who really overinvest in understanding that and then getting individuals on their side often have quite astounding successes relatively quickly in shifting the dynamic of a team.
Understand where you are coming from and your starting point. Be very clear about the North Stars. Be very clear about where you want to bring the organization. Make sure that your business agenda is then translated into a people agenda. You cannot have a business plan without a people plan. You need that people plan to drive your business plan. And if you get that purpose, that safety, the courage, the clarity, and the leadership right, performance would just become a natural outcome of all of that. But I will really invest a lot of time in the beginning and be super intentional about that. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. Every decision you make, every action you have will be amplified. So don't underestimate that.
Judith, Khadija, thank you so much. And to you for listening. Judith recently joined us on the So What to talk about the Chief of Staff role in companies. To listen back to that and to read the latest articles from Judith and the People team, just follow the link in the show notes.